Alright, so today we're going to be talking about slope intercept form, and then we're going to be talking about how to write equations in slope intercept form. So the first thing you need to know about slope intercept form is the equation y equals mx plus b. This is a very common way of writing it. You might see equations like y equals 2x or y equals 1/7 x minus 4. You could even have y equals 2. All of these would be considered to be in slope intercept form. And the reason we call this slope intercept form is m, which represents our slope, b represents our y-intercept. So we need to know about slope and y-intercept and how they affect the equation. Before we talk about how they affect it, let's talk about how we can find slope and y-intercept from these equations. So here we have y equals 2x. So if we look back at our equation, that shows that we have a value for m. There's no value for b. So this one would have a slope of 2 and a y-intercept of 0 because we're adding nothing after that x term. In this next equation, we end up having, if you notice, for the m would be 1/7, and b would be the number being added, which in this case is -4, since it's -4. It's the same as adding -4. On this last one, if you notice, there's no x term, so there's no coefficient of x, so n is 0. b is the constant term, or just the value without the variable, so that would be 2. Now the reason that this is useful is that if we were to go ahead and graph these, now that we know the slope and the y-intercept, for the first line, we would have a starting point of 0, so that's the y-intercept. So I go to the y-axis and I put a point right there on 0. And I need to lock this in place. There we go. So I go to the y-axis and I put a point on 0, and then the slope tells me to go up 2 and over 1. Up 2, over 1. Up 2, over 1. So if you notice, this line stays straight because it always has the same slope. In this case, +2. So it goes up 2, right 1. Sometimes it helps when you're writing your slope to actually write it as a fraction, because as they said in the con video, there we go. As it said in the con video, why isn't it moving? M is going to be slope, and b is going to be your y-intercept. So here I get my slope set on, and then also slope, it can be called rise over run. That's where he got the number, -3 over 4, was that it said the slope was -3/4. So that would mean for that one he would go a rise of -3, so down 3, and then run 4. Here on this one, we have a rise of 2 and then a run of 1. Anytime you have a whole number, it's always going to be a run of 1. For this next line, we would start at -4, and then we would go up 1 over 7. So again, it's rise over run. That's telling me how it's going to be growing from this point. So in this case, it's not going to be very steep. It only goes up 1, it goes over 7. I can take my line and extend that backwards. It'd be easier if I had a ruler, but here I just have to go ahead and click it and move it back. And then here we have our starting point, or y-intercept, on the y-axis of -4. And then positive slope is 1/7, so up 1 over 7. If it was negative, I would have gone down 1 over 7. So our last line here, we have y equals 2. So we know our y-intercept is 2. That's where we always start, is that y-intercept. It has a slope of 0. So that means I don't rise or fall at all. I just go straight across. Has a slope of 0, so 0 rise or fall. So here we have 3 different equations. Here we have the very first equation, y equals 2x. It started at the origin and then went up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. For the second line, we started at -4. We go up 1 over 7. To reverse it, down 1, left 7. And then for that last line, y equals 2, we have a y-intercept of 2 and a slope of 0, so 0 over 1. So rise 0, run 1. So that's how you can take an equation and get a graph. What we're going to do now is talk about how we can write the equation from the graph. So we'll still be using the same idea of y equals mx plus b. All right, and for this one, let's go ahead and say that we're given 2 points. So the first point is 3, 7, and the next point is, let's go with -3, 1. All right. So what I can do is I can graph those. So I start off, my first point is at 3, 7. So over 3, up 7. My second point is at -3, 1. So -3, 1. And now I'm going to go ahead and, if I had a ruler, I'd use that, or some sort of straight edge, and I'm going to graph that. Now, in order for us to write our equation y equals mx plus b, we've got to find 2 parts, m and b. And b, just like we talked, is going to be the point that's on the y-axis. So in this case, our b value is 4. That's our y-intercept. It's where it's going through the y-axis. After that, we have to count the slope. To count the slope, I'm looking at close intersections. Here, we have some that are very close, right by each other. That's going to make this already in simplified form. And what I mean by that is I can go ahead and check the rise. The rise is 1. The run is 1. So the rise over the run would be 1 over 1, or just 1. If we use different points, for instance, here, if I go 1, 2, 3, 4 up, 1, 2, 3, 4 over, we get 4 for the rise and 4 for the run, which, if we simplify, is the exact same thing as 1 over 1. And we want to use that simplified form, which is why I recommend using close points. Now, we just take this letter and substitute it for 1. We take b and substitute it for 4, leaving us with the equation y equals 1x plus 4. So the way that I get from having this number to having this equation is I'm just taking and I'm substituting whatever number I get here for that letter m. And I'm substituting whatever I get for the y-intercept, so where it crosses the y-axis, for the letter b. And I just put those into place. If you notice, it lines up right with it. M becomes 1, b becomes 4. So our equation for this one is y equals 1x plus 4. Let's do another example here. This time, I'm going to give you slope, and we'll say that the slope is -2. And we'll give the point, let's go with 4, let's go with 4, -2. All right, so this is really arbitrary, meaning I'm just making up problems as I go. I'm trying to take the time to make sure that the ones I work will be beneficial to you and what you're trying to do here. So on this one, I need 2 pieces. Again, okay, if I'm using slope intercept form, if it's a straight line, I can always write the equation by just finding slope and y-intercept. Now this one's nice because they tell us the slope. We know the slope right off the bat. They said the slope is -2. So I know already -2 is going to be the value that I replace m with. This right here needs to become -2. We'll get to that in a moment though. Now we have to find the y-intercept. To do that, we can graph. And so that's the way I'm going to show you is how we can graph this. So if we go to 4, -2, that means 4 on the x, -2 on the y, we have this point here. With a slope of -2, Our rise is -2, our run is 1. So rise over run for slope. That is a big concept. Keep in mind, slope is rise over run. All right, so how far up or down you go, and then how far to the right. So if we have -2, that would go down to right 1, down to right 1. And if you notice, we're not going to find our y-intercept head in this direction. It's just getting further and further away from the y-axis. So we have to reverse it. Up to left 1, up to left 1, up to left 1, up to left 1. And there we have our y-intercept. All right, we could go off the graph here to show that we have another point, but it's really not necessary since we now have our full graph made. And we take that value that we get right here, the y-intercept, and that's our b. So we have b equals 6. From this point, we write the equation. Instead of m, I put -2. X still goes there. Notice we're only substituting for m and b. Y stays the letter y, x stays the letter x. So we have y equals -2x. Our b value was 6. And now we have that written in slope intercept form. Notice it's called slope intercept form because with m is always going to be the slope, rise over run, and b will always be the y-intercept. Well, I hope this helps some. All right, again, what I did there was I graphed it using the point they gave me to start, and then with slope, since this was -2/1, I went down 2, then right 1. And then to find the y-intercept, I just had to continue those dots until I found where it touches that y-axis. Then you have your two numbers, and you put them in the equation.